Hey FTM Transtastic viewers, it's Saturday, I'm Zach, and this week we're talking about masculinity. As you can see, I am in a much different location than I was for my last video. Also, I apologize, I have a cold, so I'll probably be sniffing and being generally gross and obnoxious throughout this video. So, I'm in my room back home because I graduated from college, so I moved back home and have very few future prospects at the moment. It's a depressing state of affairs right now, but I'm giving myself a few days off to just kind of recover from the past 4 years of my life. Mostly just sitting on Tumblr and doing nothing, which is just so relaxing. But that has nothing to do with this week's topic. So, masculinity. I identify as a masculine-ish type of person. I mean, I identify as a trans man and trans dude or whatever, but I also identify as masculine. Although I'm not very traditionally masculine. Some of the guys this week have talked about like textbook definitions of masculinity and like, you know, the gender roles we kind of have associated with being masculine, and I really don't fit into any of those at all. I'm not very tough, I'm not very strong, I'm just not very manly, and I don't really want to be. But I don't think that means I can't be masculine. I think that we need to redefine masculinity so that it can encompass more people than just being like there's things that are feminine and there are things that are masculine, and it's the same binary that exists between male and female in a lot of ways. Thinking like male and female, the binary that has been constructed by society is based on these stereotypical ideas of what masculinity and femininity are, and a lot of the time, you know, the trans community talks about, you know, binary identities, but also respecting non-binary identities and kind of redefining the binary, if not entirely deconstructing it. But in a lot of ways, we kind of some of us end up reinforcing it by still holding on to these stereotypical ideas of what masculinity and femininity are. And I just think that while those are perfectly valid expressions to have, and while it's like perfectly okay for someone to fall in to those stereotypes. I mean, stereotypes exist for a reason. You know, some people do enact these traits, and that's perfectly fine as long as you aren't being a douchebag about it. But I also think we need to, like, if someone wants to identify as masculine, they should be able to identify as masculine, regardless of whether or not they fit into what the ideal of a masculine person is. If someone were to, you know, have a regular conversation or hang out with me at all, they'd probably think I was, like, slightly more effeminate anyways. Like, I'm pretty flamboyant. I talk with my hands a lot. I can have a very expressive, I think expressive is the word I want to use, voice. I like wearing tight clothing. I like a lot of things. I like a lot of gay things. You know, I probably get read as a gay man very often, and I'm perfectly okay with that. And just because I enact those traits doesn't mean that I'm not masculine, or that I can't be masculine, or that I can't identify as masculine. Because there are times in my life when I do identify as effeminate, and you know, that's just as much a part of my identity as me identifying as, you know, a masculine person who doesn't do all that many masculine things. You know, one of the first things I learned about when I was, you know, when I was coming out as genderqueer a couple years ago, and I was, like, figuring out all this trans stuff, I came across the term, like, trans masculinity, and for a while I really clung to that. I really enjoyed that term, because in a lot of ways it's not just, you know, it's not really just transgender masculinity. Like, people that aren't assigned male at birth performing masculine traits, but it's also transforming masculinity, I feel like. You know, having all different types of people from all different life experiences and all different gender identities taking on this term masculinity, or taking on femininity, trans femininity, and redefining it for themselves and being able to say, this is me, I'm masculine, or this is me, I'm feminine, and I don't need to fall into any sort of stereotyped gender category or do any stereotypical gender roles in order to get that identity. And I think those are really, really, really powerful terms, and I know there's been, in the past, a lot of, what's the word I want to use? A lot of, like, hostility and kind of tension around these terms, but I really like to see them as transforming masculinity, transforming femininity, because I think those words are really useful for a lot of people to identify with, but they can be extremely limiting or even, scary if we can't redefine them and look at them through another lens other than what patriarchal society has deemed appropriate for either of those identifying terms. I think that's enough for this week. Next week I think is religion. Yes. I don't know, I really like religion, even though I'm not religious, but I can talk about that next week. So, hope everyone is doing well, and until then, bye.